BYU and Kansas are dead. Arizona and Iowa State might win a national championship. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Co-hosting today, Cameron Stewart from Locked On Baylor. Why? He's moderately handsome and sometimes funny. How about that Super Bowl last night? I, for one, predicted it. I know you were in a similar camp as I was.
What a football game.
Lo and behold, we got exactly that. We will talk today on Locked On Big 12 about a wild week in basketball, not just Saturday, but also Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday, and every night we play it. Scott Drew to Indiana. It's back, baby. The rumors are back. And then we'll end with Texas Tech is lighting up NIL. I think everybody else should kind of follow along. Here's a formula your school can use to win in NIL. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. This week in Big 12 basketball, man, Kansas losing to Kansas State. The way they did, Kansas ties Kansas State in the second half. They're down at halftime. Like, all right, a rally's coming, and it didn't. And guess what? Kansas State is 6-6, back to 500 in Big 12 play now, red hot. And then BYU, who just lost to Arizona after they were 6-4 in conference, they lose to Arizona. Then they're ahead at halftime, get blown out at Cincinnati. Texas Tech fights against Arizona. I guess I'm more worried about these teams are going to possibly miss the NCAA championship. What am I saying? NCAA tournament like Cincinnati or BYU. Then I am happy for the ones who look like they could win a national championship because there are so many schools that had the potential and just aren't there.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's a very educational weekend, and we learned that once again, Kansas frauds. I said this last week. I said this before the Baylor game. I knew what I was getting into in the event that Baylor lost that game to Kansas. But I said, Kansas, they're fraudulent again. And I had Derek Johnson on the show last week. He convinced me it's not exactly like the 2024 season, but it feels a lot like the 2024 season. He said that they have great depth this year that they didn't have last year. And I think we've talked about it on the show, Drake, is like when it comes down to national championship teams, they actually don't have like a ton of depth. Like these teams aren't going 10 deep in the NCAA tournament. Like you got your 7 or 8 guys, and those are your 7 or 8 guys. Mm. And Kansas, they just it's not as simple as this, but they don't shoot well from 3. I mean, Kansas State shoots 40% in that game, and I think Kansas shot like 6 and 19. KJ Adams is like a player whom every other team in the conference would be like, yeah, sure, I'd take him. He'd be in my starting lineup. And Kansas fans are like, if you don't bench him, I want my Hall of Fame coach fired. And it's just kind of a mess there again. So maybe not the same way they were crumbling in 2024, but it feels like that same disconnection that we had with Kansas last year. And here, by the way, Kansas State, the same time, the whole time I'm saying on Locked On Baylor, Kansas is a bunch of frauds, I'm also saying Kansas State's not a tournament team. Are they a tournament team? Like they're making their way towards a tournament team. They have now beaten Kansas and Iowa State in the last 2 weeks. And overall, the margin of that's like what, that 27, 28 points? 27 points between those 2 wins the last 2 weekends. The Tang Gang has picked up the pieces here.
It really, really sucks. And by the way, the reason I haven't brought up Houston yet is because they beat the piss out of a team that should. Colorado is hiring Deion Sanders to be its head basketball coach. That would probably do better than whatever's happening there right now. Houston is still the best team in the Big 12 right now, 11-1 in conference play. I want to talk about the teams for now that seem to be fluctuating in and out of not just contention, but in and out of tournament capabilities. Iowa State and Kansas both have suffered tough losses in the last week, but gotten big wins. You look at the way that Kansas pummeled Iowa State, and you think, oh, are they dead? And then Iowa State bounces back in just 82-52 TCU. And that's a TCU team that is, again, like flailing in and out of even NIT contention. You talk about Kansas State being back. I think the answer has to be yes. They're 12-11, but if you finish at, 20-14, I mean, what have you done for me lately? Especially like that, you're walking your way.
You can call them. If they finish 20-14, you can call them piss because you're in.
Yeah.
This is why he has me on. This is why he has me on the show.
there. And then it's just the swath of like 6-6 or 7-5 in conference play teams that are trying to figure out if that's good enough to be a tournament squad. Like a West Virginia and a Baylor, if they both have the same record, Baylor's going to get in over West Virginia because there is brand bias in college basketball. They know they want Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears in March Madness, whether that's fair or not. My question then falls on a West Virginia or a BYU, whether you're winning or losing. If you can't figure it out, like do one or the other. Either win all your games or lose all your games so somebody else can go or you yourself can go. Because I have still question marks about BYU, West Virginia, even a Utah that spoiled a lot of parties.
Was this like real deep cut here, but was that like a peppermint patty suggestion? Like one of them should just tank the rest of the season, just lose all the games?
Get the first overall pick at this offseason.
Dude, the thing with BYU is like, I don't know how much you can use this excuse in February, but that team, more than any other team in the Big 12, even though West Virginia is in the same boat, that team feels the most of like new staff, new guys, like that it just hasn't clicked yet.
Well, they can't figure their ish out. They've got 12 guys playing every night. That's the big thing. That's why these teams don't have to go deep in the tournament, because by that point, and by this point, really, where the games are really starting to matter, you should know who your guys are. You should know what your 7 or 8 is right now. Yep. And that's not like playing 9 or 10 isn't typically the luxury that people think it is, unless you're like an all-time team. Right. And I doubt that BYU is that. I'm just going out on a limb. Don't think BYU is an all-time team right now. And West Virginia, while still on the cusp, has certainly looked better than last year. They don't feel like a team that's like, it's just not coming together. It's more of a team like it hasn't come together yet. Watch out when it does. That kind of thing. BYU is still running that kind of NBA offense. And some nights, against Baylor, they put up 95 in an overtime game. And then you get down in the mud. And Cincinnati, while not the best team in this conference by far, it certainly plays a brand of basketball that's like, hey, you want to get down in the mud? We'll play some. You can play your NBA game. We're going to play some Big 12 basketball here. And just takes it to them. Absolutely takes it to them. And I think Arizona might be the most slept-on team in America at this point. Yeah.
They just took it to Tech the other day. That we were all saying was the best team in the conference now. And I agreed. Like, Tech looks that good. And Arizona now sitting atop this conference and just wiping away a team like Tech. The Cats, man. Watch out for the Cats.
I wore my BYU. I'm in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl, which is not where the game was played. Oops on my part. Wearing my BYU hoodie.
One of these years you'll be right.
Mandalay Bay and Aria and Caesars. People are like, damn. What's that guy doing here? That guy.
What the hell is a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas?
Coming up, Scott Drew's going to Indiana. I mean, I'm calling it right now. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Oh, the Super Bowl's over. There's no more football in that. There's still so many sports like the NBA and college basketball that are just getting started. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet a fourth quarter comeback or a second half comeback, stay in on the action, and you can live bet same-game parlays. I love going in and saying, BYU basketball's up by 3 at halftime. They're kind of doing the second half fall apart thing, so I'm going to bet on the other team to win the game. And typically, there's more money in that because the other team has become a live underdog. So I'm going to probably do the live bets. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Cameron Stewart, Locked On Baylor.
Yeah.
The Indiana job is open once again. And we know, the Windhorse, we know that Scott Drew last offseason was eyeing Kentucky very seriously. Multiple reports that he was in Lexington or his family, and it was, will we go? And does his wife want to leave? And he goes to the Mexican restaurant and sits in that booth. This might be the big one. Indiana's open for like the 7th time since Scott got to Baylor. And once again, already, Scott Drew is leaving Waco for Bloomington, Indiana?
Look, I can't rule it out. Like, as much as we should be able to just rule it out with what Scott Drew has turned down, and we even, like I said it last year, so I'm going back on what I said, was that if Scott Drew turns down Kentucky, it's like, what job's he going to take at this point? But there's just enough here to be like, to worry a little bit if you're a Baylor fan. And he's what, 50, 51? That's probably around the last.
Hold on. I mean, I'm just trying to like play a bit and be facetious here. You actually think there's something to be worried about?
A little bit. Okay. Not as much as I was worried about Kentucky last year, but it's not one that I can just dismiss right away. It's about the last time he can start over.
Modern Day is open, and Matt Campbell. I hear Matt Campbell's going to take it. Like, I think Matt feels like.
I think Matt Campbell's ready to go. I think Matt Campbell's ready for a new challenge. Personally, it's just, especially with this revenue sharing, which I know is part of this show. Revenue sharing could do some painful things to a school like Baylor, and not as much to a school like Indiana. So we know that he really considered Kentucky hard last year, and have it on good authority that he basically went to Baylor and said, hey, I need like a blank NIL check here. Like we need to spend the money here in order to compete and keep us at a level that you think that we're at, and that we've shown that we can be at, which is a Final Four national championship type of level. And you saw it in the pudding in terms of the players that he brought in the transfer portal this year. Has it worked out? No. But certainly spent a lot of money there. That's going to be a lot easier for Indiana to do that. And with this revenue sharing and how much you're going to have to split up, and with Baylor football starting to become good, like if you have another season in basketball like you had this year, like people are going to want more money. People that are donating the money are going to want more towards football than towards basketball. Like that's just what people care about at the end of the day. I know I see it in my views every week. Like people care more about football. And at Indiana, I know they're in a good spot right now. They just made the CFP. They love Signetti and everything. Maybe there's a little bit more going to football than in years past, but that is a basketball school. That is a 100% basketball school, and they have donors who are willing to donate strictly to basketball. And that could be just a bit of a better situation for Scott Drew than what is on the horizon at Baylor, not what's happened so far at Baylor. The thing that kind of makes this intriguing to me is trying to compare it to the Kentucky opening last year, obviously two blue bloods of college basketball, but very different scenarios. Kentucky is still pretty damn good. They also lost their coach in April. And I don't think Scott Drew was first on their list. He was probably third or fourth, and they end up going down to probably 5 or 6 to get Mark Pope. Indiana is going to have Scott Drew near the top of the list. You know, they'll have Grant McCasland as well for another Big 12 one. They'll have Chris Beard on that list too, I'm sure. But they have not gotten this right in a while. And they tried the NBA guy in Mike Woodson, didn't work. They need to go out there and
They tried the sweaty guy.
They did try the sweaty guy. It didn't work. They've got to go out there and spend top dollar for a premier college basketball coach that still has some years ahead of him. Sorry, Rick Pitino. That still has some years ahead of him to do it at Indiana. And they have the benefit of kind of working the last couple of weeks of the season here in order to kick tires and find out who might be interested in this job, a luxury that Kentucky didn't really have. Now, the comparison I have for it to football is Nebraska. Obviously, you know, Indiana moves on from Tom Crean because they think they could do better. Nebraska moves on from Bo Pelini. They think they could do better. Neither have in 10 years or so since then, 5 or 10 years, whatever it's been.
Crean wasn't the sweaty guy. Sean Miller's the sweaty guy. The sweaty guy. Crean's the like orange fake spray tan. That's right.
Yeah, looked like if he added 10 or 15 pounds, he would be John Lovitz. Yeah. Nice guy, Tom Crean. Nice guy.
You met him?
Yeah. One time. Did meet him at the NCAA tournament. Very quick. So I compare it to Nebraska football because this is the same kind of thing we hear all the time, right? Sleeping giant. Blue blood. They're going to go out and get this coach or this coach or this coach. We heard it for so long. And really what they got was Matt Rule, which is a good hire. He's a good college football coach, but he's coming in from just being fired from the NFL. Like he didn't have a ton of options at his disposal. You weren't prying him from somewhere. You might have found the diamond in the rough with him, and maybe the next coach is pretty high profile for Nebraska. But for Indiana basketball, it's like, I don't know that you can just lure away a Scott Drew or a Grant McCasland. You might have to get a guy who doesn't have a ton of options right now, but is shown to be a good coach in the past. I don't know who that guy is, but
the Charleston coach who's at Louisville, don't know his
Kelsey?
Name. Is it Kelsey? Okay.
Yeah.
So same deal there, right? Where it's, hey, we are a multi-billion-dollar basketball institution. We want a guy, but what guy wants us? Let's go get mid-major successful man. And, sometimes that works out, but it's not necessarily foolproof at all.
No.
Shaka Smart.
That's a good example. Yeah. Shaka Flocka, man. He's found some
Who's
success
great.
now,
If you just hey, does your university have less than 10,000 students? Great. I'll never lose. Anything more, buck stops there, friends.
Can I wear my Under Armour long sleeve under my polo? And they go, yep. All right. We'll go to the Final Four eventually.
Ball or hair? What's the protocol when it comes to a head coach?
That's tough. Yeah. We got to lay some guidelines out there.
So
I think there's just a little bit. I just think there's just a little bit of a chance. Okay. Not as much as I would have given Kentucky last year, to be fair. And he turned down Kentucky.
That one was that was
really close. I think that's closer than a lot of people think it was.
They were knee deep into that one.
Yeah. We were making plans.
And then he goes to Casa de Rancho and sits in that booth, and they take the picture of him and they frame it and they put it in there. Scott Drew, and he holds up the bass fish. He's not Indiana. Just because Homer Drew.
He is from Indiana. I've seen some people be like, why would he want to go to Indiana? It's like, I don't know. It is a pretty premier job in college basketball, and he's literally from that state. But I think that might work to our advantage. He'll know how much of a pressure cooker that job is. We were saying about Kentucky. He certainly knows about that firsthand for Indiana. Not that he's scared to do that, but it's like when you have a good situation somewhere else, it's like, why go into the pressure cooker? Pat Kelsey needed to make a step up. You know what I mean? So
that's a good, again, Scott Frost is a great example. Native son of Nebraska, played there, and Woodson played at Indiana under Bobby Knight. So I mean, these people there, you keep trying to go
perfect.
Let's hire our friend. We know that he's from here. He's the alum. Scott Drew's from Indiana. Stop.
Could you imagine if Scott Drew is the first coach to consistently win at Indiana since Bobby Knight? Like that dichotomy, that duality of a successful basketball coach in Indiana.
Scott's like, we're all just going to hold hands. This
is the state of people that were like, so what? He choked the player. The guy plays 5 minutes a game. Who cares? He never choked Isaiah Thomas. That's the kind of basketball fan we're dealing with. All the power to him.
I've been to Indiana. I've been to Sullivan, Washington, Bar Reeve, I think is a place. French. I spent a week in French Lick.
Oh, really?
No way. A lot of Larry Bird stuff there. A lot of cool dive bars too. What else are they going to do? It's French Lick. There's still population like 4,000.
You can probably catch Larry at one of those, honestly.
Yeah, and at this point, coming up, Texas Tech is changing the NIL game, and I think everybody else is trying to catch them. Possibly? ? Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Texas Tech, the Matador Club. We've talked about this on Big 12 Squads before with Chris Level, who hosts Locked On Texas Tech, a big figure there for the Red Raiders. They are exploding right now. Their NIL is crazy. They just paid a softball player $1 million, reports say, to go play for them. That is really good. And now there's a new ploy and here's why it matters for the entire Big 12. There's a new ploy amongst the Matador Club to raise even more money for the university because revenue sharing is coming. So a random, faceless, nameless person on Twitter, that's not meant to be a dig, by the way. They just tweeted something good. Red Raiders, the Matador Club needs your help. We have a short window to secure our men's basketball for next year before it goes to revenue share. And immediately this tweet gets traction because we're moving into an era for Big 12 schools where it's not NIL anymore as your focal point. Instead, it's revenue sharing and paying, namely football and basketball players, a lot of money from your university's pocket. I know most people don't understand what revenue sharing is. If I had to explain it to you like you were 5, I probably couldn't. I mean, you're base.
You would have to be at least 13.
If I could try, like you are just an employee of your university, but you make a whole lot of money. I mean, $23 million that universities have to pay their student athletes every year. And there are some Big 12 schools that just can't afford that. Baylor's committed to it. Iowa State can't. Texas Tech may not know. Kentucky, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, they're going to be okay. But now NIL matters so much more because revenue sharing is about to put the SEC and the Big Ten, the halves of those leagues, in a whole nother galaxy from a good portion of the Big 12.
Yeah, and so here's where it becomes interesting in these schools that can opt out or opt into it. Because there are some that might not even want to touch the revenue sharing because they have such great collectives. Now, I don't know if that encapsulates any of the Big 12, and this is why this Texas Tech thing is fascinating.
Also, idiot. If you do that, no, you can't be like, we'll lean on the mom and pop. We'll lean on our booster club over there. No revenue sharing for us.
But if you're Tennessee and Ohio State, it's like that's more than just a booster club. Like that's almost like TV rights deal. Like that's insane money coming in. This is why like even BYU. I know they can put together one hell of a collective. It's I don't think worth it for any of the Big 12s to do it. But Texas Tech is a very fascinating one with the money that they've been able to put together the last couple of years. Is that sustainable in a 5 or 10 year model or whatever it is? And then more interesting is that Texas Tech, Kirby Hocutt, is one of the only athletic directors / athletic programs that's actually talked about the revenue sharing and how it's going to break down. You know, they're saying like, oh, we're going to put X amount towards football. I think they said 74% towards football or something like that. It's a pretty big number. So they're one of the only ones that have actually come out and said, yeah, no, we like this. And here's how we're going to do it. Here's how it's going to break down. But I think what you're going to see most with this revenue sharing is just, you're going to find very few schools that are everything schools, right? Like, I mean, most of these schools are going to see the money is being made in football. The Big 12 is wide open in football, which will certainly go towards one way or the other. Yes, you can.
Controversial here.
Yeah.
There are no everything schools. There are football, basketball schools.
Sure.
There are football schools. There are basketball schools. Football, basketball. There are zero. And here's where I get here's where it gets tough. Because 74% is going to football. You look at the softball team, at the men's tennis team, the cross country team, and to be honest with you, in my time in media, those are the coolest coaches and players to hang out with. Those are the ones who aren't pricks. And
True. They're
not going to get as big of a chunk of this, but also that quarterback is the reason that your Shedeur Sanders is part of the reason Colorado and the city of Boulder are having an economic boom right now that they've never seen before. Molotov Khrushchev on the men's tennis team, elite, like number 3 player in the country, and he's going to get his bag in the IPA or the CPA or whatever
it's called. Yep.
Whatever it is. But in revenue sharing, it does make sense to me that an athletic director would say, you know what? Most of this is going to go to football because the lights are on everywhere else because of this sport.
Yep. And that's why the Texas Tech thing looks like the model, man. 3/4 of that revenue is going to go towards football. And I don't think anyone would complain, even if the men's basketball team goes to the Final Four. It's like that's just where it is. And it's also for some of these schools like a Tech historically that has not had a ton of success in a lot of sports. And they're like, we can buy our way into kind of the elite for football. SMU does it on a couple different levels. They did it to get into a conference, and now they can do it again. And they don't even have baseball. Like, they don't care. It's going to be interesting with these Big East schools in basketball. You know, the Marquettes and the St. John's and the Villanovas of the world. Villanova's got football, but 1AA. You know, so like this is going to be fascinating how these schools break it up. And I think like not to keep inflating their tires here, but I think Texas Tech is going to be a very interesting case study for a lot of other schools. It's a public school, but it's not huge. They actually have operated in the past a lot like a private school in terms of their athletics and athletic funding. Baylor and TCU, those are two schools that won't think twice about it. They're going revenue sharing. They're not sticking with collectives only. And that'll be interesting to see how the private schools can work out in a major conference with this revenue sharing. But I think Texas Tech is going to be a case study for a lot of teams, man. It's going to get real tricky after April.
I called with a coach on a private school staff recently. I was like, man, just walk me through from your perspective what any of this means. And he's like, all I know is we have to. There's no maybe we do revenue share, maybe we do a portion of it. It is if you're going to take athletics seriously, and you have for the past few years, like a Baylor has when it comes to like the Flood Center that's just been built. I mean, donors are pouring money into the university. If you've been taking it seriously, you're going to piss all that money away if you don't opt into revenue sharing and opt in full. Syracuse said no to NIL. We won't do NIL. And somehow it kind of worked out for them last year. They won, 9-10 games in football, but it's not one of those deals. If you opt out of revenue sharing or you aren't at a full revenue share, if you're Iowa State and you say, hey, we can't do the full 22 million, we can do 10 million, you are going to lose. But yeah, you'll get the 2-star who went to Des Moines North, but you're going to lose any legitimacy in college athletics.
Yes. I think they would probably all know that, but you never know. I mean, it is, I think Iowa State's a good example of a school that's like, hey, we've got a great head coach and he's not going anywhere. And he made something out of nothing for us for years. He can do it again. We really like basketball here too. They need a little bit more financial help. We'll try to, no, like if you want to compete in this, you've got to have it going towards football, and
they're poor, man. Like
Correct.
It sucks. Iowa State is their athletic director is told, he's like, but guys, we're poor over here. Someone help, please. They had to cancel push back two different building projects in their athletics department because they're poor. And it sucks. They shouldn't be. And I don't know, remember Arizona reported they were $800 million out in petty cash or something wild.
It's like the beginning of a bar rescue episode. They're like, we are $600,000 in debt. We are losing $10,000 a month. Who's at Iowa State stealing ticket money? I don't know. But I hope Larry needs to monetize that Twitter account, man.
I hope for those schools, give them the blue check that here soon they can figure out the revenue sharing over NIL. Cam, where can more people find your work? That's the stretch. Locked on Baylor. We're going to have some Scott Drew discussion this week. We're going to see this is like a day-to-day thing, monitoring who's in, who's out of this NCAA tournament business. Mm-hmm.
We're also got plenty of college football or Big 12 football previews coming up in the next couple of weeks. And at Real Cam Stewart on Twitter, moderately funny, it's been said. Honestly, Baylor as a 3-seed or higher sucks, like hard. Baylor as a 9 seed, give it to me. Look out. Unless they play a Big East team round one, because they're going to get ish rocked. Last week's projection had them against UT, 8-9. Oh, fun. I can do that. Anything more perfect than that? I can do that. That'd be Rodney. How is UT still in it? They've been hot, man. They've been hot. Just lost to Arkansas at home. Hopefully just hot enough for Rodney to keep his job. Yeah, as long as they want to keep him. Yes. Shaka Jr. over there. It's working out real well. This has been an Always Will Be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.